Hello and welcome to CBSNews.com's Hot Sheet Live. I'm Nancy Cordes. Well, the last Republican presidential debate of 2011 is in the books. Last night in Sioux City, Iowa, the remaining 7 candidates met for one last time before the Iowa caucuses in early January. Who were the night's winners and losers? And did Mitt Romney miss an opportunity to hammer the new frontrunner, Newt Gingrich? Here to discuss it all, Yahoo News' David Chalian, the National Journal's Reid Wilson, and joining us from the Washington Post, Malika-Henderson. Hello to all of you and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
You too. So, David, let's start with you. What did you think of the debate last night?
I thought it was in stark contrast to the debate last Saturday night because Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich seemed to really pull back from where they were Saturday night, which was really trying to go after each other, and Mitt Romney on the attack to Gingrich, very skillfully rebutting those attacks. Newt Gingrich's decision to reverse course, double down on his promise for a positive campaign, I think actually helped Mitt Romney last night. Mitt Romney is not comfortable in the attack mode. It does not wear well on him. And so he got to revert back to that sort of Mitt Romney we saw throughout the debate season for the last several months, which was that presidential, try to stay above the fray, keep it on President Obama, and that plays well for him.
Reid, it seemed like they both realized that locking horns wasn't doing either one of them any favors.
Yeah, it doesn't. And look, this is the last time they get a chance to appeal to all these Iowans who are going to show up on January 3rd and caucus for or against them. It was a largely more positive debate than we've seen. And one of the things that struck me was everybody was clearly told by their advisors, look into the camera. They were sort of making their closing argument. And you don't want your closing argument to be the other guy's a jerk. You want you want your closing argument to be this is why you should vote for me. I think that's why we saw a largely more positive debate. Although there were plenty of folks who didn't shy away from throwing punches. Ron Paul and Michelle Bachmann both got in some real good shots last night, primarily against Speaker Gingrich.
Right. Malika, I wanted to ask you about that. Why do you think that Michelle Bachmann in particular went on the offense like that last night against Newt Gingrich?
Yeah, well, at this point, she doesn't have anything to lose. She's at single digits in Iowa, and I thought she actually had a pretty good performance last night, and she did at the previous debate as well in Iowa, and you could see her really in some ways working or doing Mitt Romney's dirty work and going after Newt Gingrich over Fannie and Freddie and going after Ron Paul over his pretty much isolationist, non-interventionist stance in terms of foreign policy. So I think that's going to do Mitt Romney some good if she can damage those two figures and depress their ratings, and then some of that support may go to her. But you know, there was an interesting exchange that she had with Newt Gingrich where she said, you know what, I am a serious candidate, and that's something obviously that that whole commander-in-chief test. I think that's something that a test that she hadn't yet met, and I think as Reid and David said, I think all of them went in last night with this whole idea of we've got to look like the president, we've got to look like a commander-in-chief, and I think all of them were able to do that.
And her defense came after Newt Gingrich had said that she didn't have her facts straight. And that's not the first time that he said that about Michelle Bachmann. So give us a little reality check here. Has she had her facts straight when she's gone after him on a number of issues? And was it fair of him to say she doesn't know what she's talking about?
Well, as a matter of fact, this morning, PolitiFact.com, the sort of arbiter of a lot of these things, gave her a pants-on-fire rating when she said that PolitiFact had never said she'd gotten anything wrong. So they have questioned a lot of her statements in the past, some of her statements specifically on Mitt Romney and his health care plan in Massachusetts, and now some of the things she said about Newt Gingrich. So I think throughout this campaign, everybody has had these moments of saying things that aren't exactly true and then being called on it.
But her main attack, her first thrust to Newt Gingrich last night, which really did knock him back on his heels on the Freddie Mac stuff and the 1.6 million, her facts there are pretty much solid. I mean, she's not trying to call him a lobbyist when he actually wasn't a registered lobbyist. She is just making the attack that he took money to peddle his influence. There's no doubt that that was the case, and that is actually what knocked him furthest back on his heels last night, it seemed to me.
Nia, I want to ask you about something interesting that Mitt Romney seems to be doing both in this latest debate and out on the campaign trail, kind of reframing his experience in the private sector and specifically at Bain Capital, and trying to rebut this attack that he destroyed jobs and bankrupted companies, and that he's, you know, he created as many jobs or more, and that this is just part of capitalism and that it's the president that doesn't understand how this works.
Yeah, that's in some ways always been his argument, this idea that he has worked in the real economy and he knows how to create jobs. I mean, one of the criticisms that he lobbed at Newt Gingrich was basically to say, he creates theories, or he talks about theories, and I create jobs. I think this is going to be a little challenging for him, this whole idea that Mitt Romney, who I think is worth something like $250 million, knows anything about the real world. I think in some ways people do sort of look at him as Mr. Rich Guy, as sort of a patrician figure. But this is part of a debate also that he was having with Newt Gingrich, this whole idea of how Newt Gingrich made his money. Was it mainly through trading his influence or peddling his influence by serving in government, or was it like Mitt Romney in the private sector? So these are some of the arguments that he's obviously going to make, and obviously lob at the president. But again, I think you have people who worked at Bain coming out saying, well, our job really wasn't about creating jobs. It was really about creating wealth for our investors. And I think you'll see the Democrats come back and say, well, you created a job, you created lots of jobs, but you also destroyed a lot of jobs as well. And that was one of the things we saw in his races in Massachusetts, that they cut a lot of ads there with people who were put out of work because of some of the work that Mitt Romney and his partners did.
Before we look ahead to Iowa, guys, talk about John Huntsman, Rick Santorum. Did they do anything that changed the game for them in Iowa or anywhere else last night?
I don't think they did anything at the debate last night. Huntsman, especially on China, I thought that Huntsman did okay, but not as well as he has done in previous debates. Santorum is always good. Santorum is an underrated debater. He's always performed well. It's just that nobody's really looking at him, and nobody has throughout this entire process. If anybody is to outperform their poll numbers in Iowa, I wouldn't be surprised if it is Santorum. He spent time in all 99 of Iowa's counties. He says he's going to have precinct captains in most of the 1,700 different precincts around Iowa. So if anybody could outperform, it could be Santorum. But then again, it's not that hard to outperform 2%.
Right.
I think Ron Paul did himself a little bit of damage last night. He's been building a really strong operation in Iowa. It's still
Probably
one of the big
strongest.
question marks. It's still one of the big question marks about whether or not that operation can actually deliver caucus goers in the winter night on January 3rd.
Right.
But he does have some momentum here. Last night he spent an inordinate amount of time on foreign policy, which is where he is at most odds with the Republican electorate. And so where they love his libertarian stuff on some economic issues and the Fed and what have you, that kind of non-interventionist talk that he went and talked about quite a bit last night in the debate, I think some people who would give him a look may have turned away if they are Iowa Republican caucus goers.
Right, when you're talking about cutting the military in half and that kind of thing, doesn't play well in Iowa. So what do you see going forward? Okay, so now they're unshackled from these debates finally, and they can actually spend the next couple of weeks on the campaign trail in Iowa. What do you see happening?
Well, at the moment, I think what we see is a resurgent Mitt Romney, and Newt Gingrich's poll numbers were great for the last couple of weeks, but polls are always sort of a lagging indicator, and the support has started to erode on the ground. We've started to see that in a couple of robo polls. We've even started to see that in a couple of live call polls that the campaigns are conducting privately. They're seeing some of that support slip. I think it's very telling that Newt Gingrich is spending today traveling back to Washington, D.C. He'll spend tomorrow at a book signing at Mount Vernon, and then at a concert that his wife Callista is giving, and that's all here in D.C. I mean, 2 weeks to go. This is not a time for a break. This is time to get out on the trail and do what Rick Perry is doing with a 40-something stop bus tour, what Michelle Bachmann is doing. She'll hit all 99 counties before caucus day, and even what Mitt Romney is doing. He's on the trail all over the place.
One of those weeks is holiday week. It's going to get very tough to capture voters' imagination and attention.
Well, he may need to mend some fences here in Washington, D.C. Nia, I've been shocked this week by just the virulence of the Republican leadership here in Washington, sort of the Republican glitterati just absolutely slamming him. I mean, they were sounding a note of warning for the first week or two when he started to surge in the polls, but now it's really gotten quite nasty.
Yeah, and it's obviously not only lawmakers, former lawmakers, but then columnists George Will, Kathleen Parker, the National Review. And so, yeah, there's a real chorus and a real ringing of the alarm, it seems like, among the Republican establishment to say this guy isn't ready to be commander-in-chief, that he's like a guy who waves around a hand grenade and threatens to pull the pin. And, I think at some point Gingrich did have a bit of an opening to say, well, you know what, if the Washington establishment hates me, then maybe I'm doing something right. But the problem, I think, for him is that it's like the floodgates have opened. Everyone is piling on him. And at this point, there isn't really a clear sense that he has enough money to go up on the air to rebut some of these charges. He can obviously go on Fox News anytime he wants, but the sort of concentrated messaging that he needs on the airways in the form of ads or in form of mailers, I don't think he can afford at this point. So that's that's going to be a real hurdle for him going forward.
And he doesn't have precinct captains in many precincts in Iowa. So I guess he's just going to be relying on name recognition for the most part.
And that's what he relied on throughout a lot of the early part of his campaign. How funny, though, that for so long Mitt Romney has so desperately wanted to be the candidate of the Republican establishment, has wanted to be accepted by all these establishment
And this has finally done it for him.
And the way they do it is when Newt Gingrich starts to surge. Nobody was really worried that Michelle Bachmann would be the nominee when she surged over the summer. Nobody was really worried that Herman Cain was going to be the nominee because he wasn't putting together that kind of campaign organization. Now all of a sudden everybody's worried that it might be Gingrich, so they're running to Romney. I think this only benefits Mitt Romney. He's going to come out of this sort of 2 weeks of nervousness in Boston actually being a little bit stronger.
And if Romney doesn't do that well in Iowa, if he doesn't place first or even second, is that a big blow for him going into New Hampshire, or does he pretty much have it sewn up there?
I mean, I think that the Romney campaign has spent more time setting expectations for Iowa this year than on almost anything else that they've done at their headquarters. I think that he certainly doesn't have to win Iowa to continue. A Romney win in Iowa does a lot more good than a Romney second or third place showing in Iowa does bad for him, because he has the operation to go the distance here if he needs to.
And no one really expects him to win in Iowa. Okay, so let's do predictions before I let you guys go. Nia, I will start with you. I know everybody's favorite. What's your big prediction for Iowa?
Wow, this is tough. I don't think reporters are supposed to make predictions, but hey, I'll do it anyway. I think I'm going to go with Romney coming in second, and I'll go with Ron Paul winning in Iowa. And if that's the case, I think there are all these arguments to be made about Iowa being sort of irrelevant. And if he wins, I think that might underscore that argument.
Got it. Okay, how about you guys, Reid?
That's one of the biggest dangers that I think Iowa and New Hampshire face right now, is the prospect of becoming irrelevant. Neither of them are holding their first primary in the nation this year. The first primary of the nation was the debate season that we just went through, and debatable as to who won. But I think in Iowa we're going to see a stronger showing than we think from Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, and from Rick Santorum. But then again, as I say, Santorum's so far behind that even a stronger showing than expected isn't going to get him anywhere close to where he needs to be.
David?
I am predicting that we are going to see not a great deal of distance between each of the candidates and when the results come in Iowa. And with that, if the candidates are pretty closely bunched together, we're going to see many more tickets out of Iowa than maybe we normally do.
Anybody willing to put $10,000 on their wager, though?
Maybe a steak dinner.
I think the statute of limitations on that joke has probably run out. So this is our last show of the year, so I'll make it now. David Chalian, Reid Wilson, Nia Malika-Henderson, thank you all so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for Hot Sheet Live today. Join us here every Friday at 12:30 p.m. I'm Nancy Cordes. Have a great weekend. See you later.